And although I am currently working at the University of Manchester, this particular project is a project that was undertaken at the University for the Creative Arts, and it's still ongoing. And what I'll be doing is handing over to Peter Newton in a few minutes for him to talk about the real work that's going on. I believe that a lot of innovation is going to come from a very small HE or large FE who haven't really got the money or the time or the expertise or all of the experts to be able to go and thoroughly understand and do research in all sorts of things. Basically, if you're in a small HE, then you haven't got enough time to actually do things. You've got to do things quickly, you've got only a few people who have to cover a large area, and you've got to make decisions fast and just go with it. Okay, but that's the real world, particularly if you're in danger of sort of being wiped out. Or, you know, with this is sort of a talk about a very small institution and what they've done and where they're going. And there may be some useful lessons to bigger institutions. Okay, so who are the University for the Creative Arts? Okay, it was formed only a few years ago. It was basically 5 FE colleges spread across Surrey and Kent. Okay, so there are only 7,000 students, so it's really small compared to some other universities, spread across 5 campuses with 130 miles between them, so we're not quite highlands and islands, but we're not far off. Small turnover, 60 million, an IT budget which is disproportionately large, but given the geographic distance and the fact you've got all of the issues, a total team across 5 campuses of 28. Okay, so I'm now currently at Manchester, and I think we've got, this might get slightly embarrassing, sort of when you get into the total numbers, but Manchester are well over 10 times as big when you put into all of the faculties. Where they've got skills split across all of their campuses, so you don't have all of IT in one place, so you've got all of the geographic disadvantages. And although there is always a small IT presence on every campus, they're basically the PC support networking type of people. Okay, so you sort of would look at this and say, I wouldn't start from here, mate. This looks really tough, okay? But that's where we're starting from. Just a quick picture of you know, sort of where they are. If you go from Canterbury in the east to Farnham in the west, my geography coming from the north of England is I'm quite challenged, and I find it really difficult when you get south of London. But you've got, in order to get from Farnham to Canterbury, you can either sit on the M25 forever, or you have to go right into the centre of London, across London, and back out the other side. So it could take you 4 hours. Okay, so it's really not that easy for moving around. And when you've got very small institutions, and many of them might even be teaching approximately the same course, because the 5 institutions merged together, well, they were similar institutions. So gosh, there's all sorts of issues that they've got, but from business side, as well as geography, as well as everything else. What the business issue was that they decided that they were going to consolidate and they were going to remove this particular campus here and sell it to another organisation called Mid-Kent. But unfortunately that site had the technical guys and it had the data centre. Okay, so he said, oh, okay, right, but these things happen. What are we going to do about it from an IT point of view? Because, hey, that's a threat not only to the data centre and to the infrastructure, but also to the guys you actually need to build the future. So you've got a people as well as a business as well as all sorts of things. Yeah, sort of this, even worse, okay, so I've got to paint the picture black, okay, because, you know, this isn't a walk in the park type project, and as Peter's not been around long, and he had a lot more hair just about 6 months or so ago, they had some pretty lousy networking. Apologies to Dan and everybody else, but many of these things are historic, because if you think of them as being, you know, just small FE colleges, these are their network connections, effectively single points of, you know, sort of from some of these campuses. There are some dual, But in many of these you say, crumbs, single point of failure all over the blessed place. Okay, so risk is piled on top of risk just to maintain what's going on. So, having decided sort of that the business was selling the campus and moving out, there were a number of questions that had to be answered. What should we do with the data centre? Okay, where should it go? What are we going to do? Is it going to go in-house? Is it going to go out of house? Is it going to go to a mixture of the two? What are we going to do about disaster recovery? What are we going to do with the technical guys who actually happen to be based on the campus that we're therefore selling? Are they going to hang around when they're that close to London, or will they just say, good luck guys, and then disappear? Okay, so you've got all the people issues. And then how do we minimise the risk to the institution as they're going to go through this? And that was all going on at the same time as sort of falling roll numbers and all the other changes that are going on everywhere else. Okay? And then when you've only got 28 people in the entire institution, you say, okay, they've got a few little issues. Now, it's usually best when I was listening to Radio 4 this morning, okay, and there was somebody trying to explain the adage about work evolves to fill the time available. Did any of you hear it? And yeah, right. Well, it was really quite interesting. The guy who was explaining this adage said, if you're a little old lady who is retired and has done this, that and the other, and she wants to go out and decides she needs an umbrella, she could spend ages looking around for an umbrella and spending time getting ready. If you had to get somewhere just like that, you actually do it in a very short space of time. And I think that sort of adage of work expands to fill the time available applies to a lot of IT. If we had time, we would have done all sorts of things. We didn't, because we're running towards a brick wall. And so all of these questions are up, together with lots of others. And we're then over to what do we do about it? So I'm going to hand over to Peter to start talking about each of these choices and what happened. And then we'll come back and answer all sorts of questions.
Yeah. So I started in July 2010 and was greeted by those problems. And so there were four choices, I think, really. Basically, you could build one. You could implement a cloud, your commercial data center, and HE data center solution. So I'm going to go through how we went through the deduction, expand on it, and also I run to about 11:20 for any questions. But if you have questions during this, because there's quite a lot of information. So there was a build that went up in Epsom called PC5, and we were supposed to be able to put it as a DR. Now this comes interestingly back to what you were saying earlier about cost. Epsom and the team is in Maidstone. There's a cost of the M25. If you've ever sat on it, if you're in a DR situation, you've got 4 hours. You could kill half of that time sitting on the M25. So there was initially a complete risk, which no one had looked at. The other thing was that the connection at the time was for DR duplication was to Maidstone, which was astronomical. Again, no one had looked at that cost. So, and when we actually looked at it as a data center, it just wasn't the right size. So there's some things that draw out. If you're looking at building a DR, is it ever going to be a DC or possibly a DC? Think about these things on building it. Because in our case, it was null and void. We couldn't use it for anything else apart from a site server, campus server environment. So we could build a new data center on another campus. Now we have approximately yesterday 25 terabytes of data, which I'm sure doesn't compare at all with Manchester and a lot of you, but it had 5 racks. So we had a choice. We could either build a data center, which was quoted around about 100, 150, 200K, or we could look at other options, rent out. Now I found when I started to work this, there is a point where it's more economical to build than to host. We weren't near it at all. So building a new data center was null and void. The other options is because our university is in such transition, we're not sure which campuses we want. Student numbers in the arts sector was fluctuating 2 years ago quite dramatically, I just thought it wouldn't be a good idea to build a data centre into a site that could potentially close. So we scratched that one. So rent space from another commercial, it was an option, or another university, it was an option. So I'll go into those. And finally, there was cloud. We had a number of people that wanted to sell us cloud. It's a good idea, but in the end, you still need a data center for your single rack. You still want your AD. You don't want to give up everything, or I felt I didn't want to give up everything to an environment that was quite fresh. There was a number of meetings where people were quoting 3 years, 4 years to move to a cloud. If you wanted to reduce that, then obviously the cost goes up. I have till July 2014 to exit Maidstone with everything. So again, cloud I was unhappy with. And again, timescales are dependent on expenditure. We didn't have that much money to expend. So on management considerations, there was a key thing that I didn't want to lose the technical staff in Kent. I would have to recruit completely again. So one of my things was try and promote the use of keeping the staff in Kent. I wasn't sure at the time how I would do that, and if I had been told during that time by exec, we don't want them in Kent, we want them in Farnham, then I would have fitted round them. But I was allowed to do what I thought would be the right choice for staff. Again, mixture of different environments, infrastructure as a service, application as a service. Again, the date was too near to actually go down that for everything. Commercial environment, a vendor, again, a problem that we would find. And staying in the HE sector, how do we get a good service? So Paul had put an email out across the HE sector, some of you would have seen it, to the director level, asking for their experiences and ideas on data centres. I visited about 5 or 6. The data centres had space in it. Some people had downsized so much to cloud, you were running half a data centre empty and could host. But there are no LAs, no SLAs, no contracts, no guarantees of 24-hour service, and a critical thing, which Paul always goes on about, but it's totally true, in clearing or in enrolment, if the data center dies, who takes precedence? The university hosting the data center or its customer? It was too much of a risk for those environments. And then finally, how do I persuade the board that my idea is a really good idea, whichever it came up with? So to prepare for this, it was fairly obvious that even if we did want to go to cloud, that we needed to be virtualized. So we were about 50%. We've increased to about 90% of all our applications are running on Hyper-V because it's cheap and it's now a mature environment. And the rest are generally restricted by vendors. So Blackboard and Aggresso, some of our environments have to be on a physical box. But generally, we're 98. So we can shift our environment from one infrastructure server to another without much hassle. You saw before, the network was a complete mess. It's based on ideas people were having and then never completely took through to fruition. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Again, commercial in-sector suppliers and briefing. And what I wanted to do, which is really critical, is I wanted to set something that would be ongoing and permanent. So I wanted to enable a route map. I didn't want to build a data center and then go, I've done it. I wanted to set in motion an idea that we could cloud at the end of it, whether that's in 5 years or 10 years, whether that's 1% of our environment or 100% of our environment. I wanted to prepare for that. And therefore, building a data center, going to commercial providers is almost throwing a lot of money away. And so I wanted to prepare for that point where cloud is mature, cloud is ready, right, 50% passed over. So this was the structure, or is the structure I'm now aiming for. KPSN is Kent Public Service Network. At the moment, Janet are in partnership with KPSN to provide the network to the universities within the Kent area, which is specifically us, Christchurch, University of Kent, and a couple of HE providers. I decided to put the ULCC in the data center, which I'll go to a bit more, and everything went into double network connections at 1 gig. There were originally 100s, so this would mean that if we go to cloud, we're ready for it. That if an environment dies, if a student application dies, we don't lose the site. The site keeps running, because if you put all your money into cloud, you've got to have the security of the network to deliver the cloud. And again, this is just an idea of how it to flow through. You unlock your applications from your hardware. Then you can physically move your hardware to a rack, or you can move the application to someone else's server. The idea is to free up your environment so it's completely movable depending on what the application is, or the hardware, or security, etc. So, progress to date, the governors and the exec board came on board around the beginning of the year. As I said, we'd virtualized 90% of our environment, but are restricted by a number of vendors, which is a pain. We have contracted with ULC for the hosted data center, and we went to Maidstone Studios as a local provider for the DR. Janet, the amount of quotes I've passed to Janet, my name's probably a black mark, but we've had hundreds of connection quotes, different options around to try and get the cheapest but most robust environment. And HP, we've bullied HP into giving us rather good costs for 3-PAR and SANS and Blade environments. So, in-house sector hosting. So this is what we found. As I said, Paul wrote to the Kaiser group. We found the HEs were keen to discuss, but again, my timescales. I think and I was speaking earlier, if you want to share something, don't do it at the end of your contract. Don't do it with 3 months to go on a contract. It's almost, if you sign a contract for 5 years, the minute you sign that contract for 5 years, start working out at the end of that contract, if you want a partner, and find your partner from that. A year is not strong enough in an HE sector. So that's my personal environment. So it just wasn't possible going into a relationship with an HE provider. We got some very good prices for hosting hardware in racks. We also got some absolutely crazy prices, which would double the price. And those double the price came from Janet. They came from EduServe. And speaking aloud, I'm quite surprised that we're not operating in a much more commercial environment. I spent 20 years in the commercial sector. With the number of universities that are here and the budgets that they have, we should not be looking at the current cost. 12K should be really what everyone is offering us, my personal view, and we should bully them until they get to that point. So ULCC, absolutely brilliant for charity, or for registered as a charity, part of UCL, ULC, University London Colleges, it's a computer centre, but not attached to it. So that they have multiple partners across, whether they're Aggresso partners, Moodle partners. So they not, we wouldn't be a first-time customer with them. So that also all their downtime is outside of clearing, enrollment. So again, perfect place to have a data center, because when they shut down and do their tests, they're exactly with the times that we would want them to be. Extremely cost efficient, and there next to our Aggresso servers is a hosted Aggresso environment or a Moodle environment. So if we ever want to go outside of our hardware or reduce costs, we've got a partner sitting right next to us who can do that. And again, it came across. So ULCC were a benefit. So commercial hosting, as I said, OJU tenders, We didn't want to go down OG tender. It would take 3 months. It would be an absolute nightmare in delivering for me, because it's only me doing this project. So I was the only project manager on it. I was negotiating the contract, and I was running a support service team at the time. So going down OG would be an absolute headache for me. G-Cloud was a good idea, but it's specific to cloud environment, and as I said, I wanted a physical home for the boxes. Janet Bokeridge, again, everything was over 20k, and I've got 2 vendors that are offering me half that. So I'm sorry, I couldn't use you. So, but we found, and it came up really weird because it wasn't, I didn't expect them, is that Mason Studios came in at a very competitive price, and they already had a relationship. They were hosting broadcast medias. I was introduced off the cuff to the director of Mason Studios. Their data center is award-winning. It's got, I think it's 1.5 or 1.4 PU. It's absolutely excellent data center. In fact, just after this, another one of universities started to look at them as a hosting site. So it's obviously I made the right choice, I think. They understand our culture, and they're extremely cost efficient, and they wanted to help. There was another point that I found, is because we're equivalent to an SME, it's quite difficult to have that weight when trying to negotiate with HP or trying to negotiate with Fujitsu or a large commercial. I mean, I was able to do HE because I previously worked with them on other projects outside of this sector, but generally they're quite hard. Mason Studios is about our equivalent, so they wanted us as a partner. We're a good little badge for them to have and build on and grow. So it was getting that dual size right made quite a bit of difference. So, as I said, Janet, excellent, cost-effective and responsive in relation to networks, provided an excellent service, although I'm having to go about the brokerage. The level of service in providing networks was spot on, great turnaround. So Janet for our networks, HP for our SANs. Again, their turnaround is not as good as it should be, and it's not what I expected from a commercial background. But again, if you push the right people, you get a good turnaround, and they start moving. But they do sometimes slow down, so you have to keep on top of them. Mason Studios, DR, ULCC. So currently we're 5 racks, but because of the technology we could be using from HP, we're likely to go down to 2 racks. So if you could work out roughly what you think we might be paying for 5 racks, we've saved quite a bit of money per year on budget by going to a free power environment. We brought in an external provider who'd done DR in other county councils, and I also think they did some work with the University of Arts London to help us, because we need to use different backup technology across the bandwidth. And we've brought in 2 contractors to beef up the team. And again, as I said, contracts, we're going for 2 years because we're not sure how technology will constantly move and change. In the last 3 years, as I said, I spoke to one university who I think 5 years ago built a data center, and then they said they wished they'd negotiated with another university right next door to them, because they probably could have gone 2 buildings half the size. So we're trying to keep our contracts small. So upgrade network environment, free power, virtualized. So from 3, 4 and 5, this is how we're going to do it. So we're going to virtualize, or the virtualized systems that reside in Maidstone, we will cut over to ULCC on a progressive nature. We will then install the DR in Mason Studios and start replicating the ULCC into Mason Studios. And then whatever's left physically in Maidstone, we will put on the back of a lorry and drive to ULCC. which is a standard practice which is used in other organisations. I say it quite casually, but obviously, if you're sticking kit on the back, you're going to get insurance for the kit and make sure that you've got the right people in place. But literally is, right, Saturday, off, lorry, on, test. And then once, the other thing that we found, because it was really good with HP and what they've done with us so far, we've got enough to look at deduplication on tape and cloud as backup. So what we're looking at doing now is the original was Mason Studios with a DR and ULCC as the core. We're now using the data center that we've got, or the campus environment at Epsom, to create deduplication. A couple of reasons for that. One, I don't need to pay staff at ULCC or staff at Maidstone to tape everyone
Once I get one, it's a lot.
to tape change at Maidstone Studios. So I've actually saved it's not a lot, but I think it's somewhere in the region of £1,000 a year for tape. But also because we're going to relook at it, we're going to dedupe. So we think we're going to save about £500 a year on tapes, just because we won't need to buy that amount of money. And then we'll look at using cloud and moving cloud into an application environment. So once everything is in the ULCC, it doesn't stop. It was never intended to stop. So it's in a safe place, it's being DR'd, the data's being deduped, and now we can say, okay, what can we cloud? And that was always the intent. By having it in ULCC, don't need to worry about any changes to legal requirements for green tax, which we would never be able to compete with large-scale organisations. We've got the security of a data centre that's always being upgraded and remodelled. And Epsom tape management, I've got staff there to move the tapes. And again, we can go to cloud. So although it's a single project, the outcome just moves forward, and that was always the intent, to carry on with the strategy. And that is it so far. Is there any questions?
Just in terms of your power provision and the air conditioning technologies, what are you sort of rating at a sort of rack level in terms of power?
We've got a concern that we could be about 45.
Kilowatts per hour.
But we're not sure, because the 3-PAR is such a new technology. There is a belief that we could almost take out 25% of that, of our 3 racks goes to 1 rack. So that 1 rack is going to kick up a lot of kilowatts per hour, but we think we can reduce it because of the 3-PAR.
And ULCC can handle that?
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. It's likely to go, if you put all the boxes together, it's likely to be 2 racks, but we're likely to spread it out. But they will basically charge kilowatts over.
But it's still traditional crackdown there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, just say, if you ask a question, could you just say who you are and where you're from?
Sorry, Simon Markham, University College London.
Yeah, excellent, thank you.
There is a trick that we're using, okay, and that is, as a very small institution, we haven't got much clout. So, what do? Okay, because you motivate people, I believe, by 4 factors: fear, greed, embarrassment, or chocolate. Okay, sometimes fear substitutes. Nobody fears us. We're a small institution. Okay, nobody's going to get rich out of university for the third class because you haven't got a lot of money. Okay, and embarrassment, well, they're not dealing with us. Okay, and we can't buy enough chocolate. So how do we actually do it? So we're banking on greed. Okay, and the way you do that if you're a small institution is you say, hey, Mr. HP, we're just one of many. If you get it right for us, then you'll be able to replicate what you're doing with us with 10, 20, 30 other universities. Oh, and by the way, we're very aware you've got some big contracts with a few big universities, but the market's for small HE. And funnily enough, instead of talking to your normal HP people in the UK, you get head of HP in Europe. saying, if this is a trend, this could be a very interesting trend. And you do the same thing with ULCC, because we're only a tiny little thing. They've given us cracking prices, much better than what we've shown you already. We say, hey, ULCC, if you're going to go in this direction, we're prepared to do this. And if you can do it so that it is simple to then replicate, then you can get some really interesting deals. And we've already got the head of HP Europe coming to talk to our Vice-Chancellor. And we're saying, okay, what are you going to do about interns? What are you going to do about all sorts of things? Here is a little project. What else can you do? And so by doing something innovative, you can actually bring in lots of other factors to play.
I think if you, as one of the things that I said at the end, if you show those vendors that this is not the end of the game, this is almost the beginning of moving into cloud or moving into something maybe that you own, or it's a carrot that appeals to them. So, and also deadline projects, having worked in those companies before, projects which end don't really bring much more business, but with the view knowing that we will move forward continually, that they go, oh, okay, wonder what they'll do next, and so that's quite an attractive.
We then put the steel fist into the velvet glove, and we come to places like this to say what we're going to do. And we nail them by actually saying, if we screw up, it's actually going to be HP who failed to deliver. If we screw up on the network, Janet have told us everything's going to be ready. So have ULCC. So part of this is the potential embarrassment. Now, that's how a small institution that doesn't have much money is actually going to do something that otherwise they wouldn't have the resources or the skill sets to do. And there's an expression in the northeast where I come from which says, "Shy bairns getting out." And actually, this is sort of led by the board of University of the Creative Arts and their governors to actually say, yeah, we've got to bet the farm. We're going to have to because we're selling the campus. How do we actually minimise risk and make sure that we actually deliver and hit the timescales? So there's quite a lot of management around this, as well as techie stuff.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yeah?
John Harry, in the University of Birmingham, your rack hosting costs, are they for the rack or do they include electricity as well?
They include everything, yeah.
Part of what, again, part of the logic was, if we were to go straight to platform as a service, why would your techies want to hang around? So we've got the technical guys interested, give them an empty HP machine, virtualize, move to infrastructure as a service. Once you're there, you can then start saying, should you move to platform as a service? We spoke to YH Man as being an alternative, but a lot of what YH Man are wanting to do is actually platform as a service. And what we had to do was fast baby steps and not a big leap. And if we were to go too fast towards platform as a service, we might upset our technical guys that we're only one deep in lots of areas. As a small institution, it's a luxury to be too deep in anything. Okay, so there's all sorts of things, backgrounds to each of our steps.
Yeah. The other one is, if we'd gone north, it has the same problem as the M25 with travel costs. Even if you were to weigh out that you were going up to that site once a month, if you actually look at the costs, it still goes for one person into thousands. And then you go, well, if I can if the rack is 6 and now I'm paying 8, then it doesn't. You have to balance out the travel costs and expenses and everything else. So there are. When I said hidden costs, you'll find it everywhere, and you've got to be really sure of what you're doing. The other thing with the rack, it's affixed for a certain power wattage, and then anything over, they'll charge extra.
Can you say what that wattage is?
I think it's about 25, 26.
Tim Price from the Carbon Trust. You've obviously done a lot of good work in looking at the cost implications of these different options. Did you look at all of the carbon implications of them as well?
Yeah, the simple thing was, if we built it, the cost to make for the carbon and to prepare the data center for that, and the concerns that the green tax would because the need to constantly drive up the quality of a data center. That's where it came with us. So it was basically the Mason Studios has won, I think, 2 years running green data center, and ULCC does meet those requirements.